You know, at the time, I was living the life that so many live. For my brain, it was like, get married by 25 to 27, have kids by 30, make sure you become a good provider. I didn't want to get engaged. When I woke up in that story, I realized it wasn't my story anymore, and I didn't know how to leave it. And I didn't know how to leave it because
Welcome to the Eat, Play, Crush podcast. I am your host, Mary Shanuda. Mark Groves.
Mary Shanuda.
Welcome to the Eat, Play, Crush podcast.
Oh man, this has been in the making. I'm so excited.
I am very excited, especially to interview you. I'm really learning a lot about myself in this process. But before we get started, we're going to do a fun visualization.
All right, I'm ready.
You have just been dropped off at LAX. You are now heading down the coast. Beautiful day. I want to know two things: the dream car you're driving and the song that's playing.
Oh man, dream car I'm driving.
Because I heard you have a car collection.
Well, collection's a strong term. Anytime you have more than one, it's now a collection. I'll take that. It would be a 19. Oh man, that's tough. It would be a 1972 Chevy Blazer stock.
Color?
They have a few that I like. I'd probably go with they have one called Ochre, and it's like a yellowy,
Like a deep yellow, mustard yellow. Yeah. Okay. And what are you listening to?
I'm spending a lot of time in Idaho, so country music's hitting me a little different, but I think it would probably...
Country music is hitting me a little differently.
It's hitting me a little differently. It would probably be... I mean, one of my favorite artists has always been Ben Howard, but one of his like original albums, probably the song Promise or Old Pine.
Have you always been into classic cars?
Yeah. Oh my God. I almost bought a 1964 Impala for my first car, but I went and brought it to get inspected.
That was smart.
Yeah, it was a good. My dad made me. And I remember the mechanic's like, the fenders are kind of like waving in the wind. They're not solid. And I never bought it, but I would see it around because it was owned by a neighbor. And I always used to long for it. But yeah, I always loved the nostalgia of them, the smell, the art. Like there's such art in the interiors of those. And I think there's also something about, you and I, and I'm sure a lot of people listening, are some of the last generation that will know the world before the internet. And there's something about those cars that feels like you pick up the momentum of human innovation in this like exciting time, in the 60s. I really love cars before 68, somewhere around there.
There's a big resurgence of nostalgia right now. Maybe this happens for every generation when they're our age. Everything that was younger becomes cool again.
Our parents were doing that. Yeah, for sure.
It was fun to find out that you have a car collection or the beginning of a car collection.
I have an aspiring collection.
Yeah. I want to go back to how we met and give Brandon a shout out, Collinsworth. Amazing human being.
The best, yeah.
And I wasn't familiar with your work prior. And so got to speak to you and get to know you personally, and then got to see your body of work. You're a relationship expert. I have my own opinions on relationships. So it's always have had great conversations. And it was an honor to be on your podcast to talk about the relationship to nutrition, wellness, moving your body, hormones, as you show up for yourself, as you show up in relationships. And I put you through my gut reset, and you've done it twice.
I've done it 3 times.
3 times. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And that first time, you were so great at giving me notes of how you felt each day. And so if you could tell me your experience all over again and what you felt, what you were able to attach it to, especially during the fasting days. I can't remember if you and Kai were dating.
She tried to do it. Yeah, we were.
And how you showed up in that dynamic.
Well, Kai has said to me, I'm just not designed for fasting because every time we've gone to do something like that together, she taps out in like 22 minutes, not 22 hours. So I just laugh now. I'm like, you're just not designed for it. We're not doing this together. But yeah, we did do it. She did all the broth, and she kept eating the foods that were in.
Which still works. The gut reset is modified for each person.
Yeah, she needs a full modification. Yeah, there's no doubt. This is my wife, for people who don't know. So yeah, for me, what I love about it is it's very straightforward. It tells me exactly what to make, which I need that. The guidelines of like ingredients is very different than here's how you put all this together. Here's how long it's going to take.
Right.
And it tastes good. And I ate foods. First off, the broth is kind of, because you're fasting, but you're still consuming broth.
Right.
And I felt like I'd never fasted before. So that was I was still getting stuff in my stomach, which felt great, but it was also super nourishing.
Right.
I'd never drank so much broth because it's a lot of broth.
And it's a medicinal recipe for
dandelion. I remember there's such good stuff in it. The olive oil, having olive oil, a tablespoon with every broth mixture.
Very deliberate ingredients.
Yes. Well, I know you're very intentional about all of it. And when I had not fasted before, so I remember telling you that one of the things that I was confronting was the place that eating had in my life for emotion.
Right.
Which was really powerful because I love to be able to see the edges of what, especially emotionally, what I'm hitting and what I've yet to discover. And I can look back and see that food and sugar became a soothing mechanism for me. I joke that when I was young, my nickname was Sensitor.
Yes.
Right.
Great. Look at you looking at my notes already.
Right. The sensitive dinosaur, my brother told me I would have been, which at the time, I did feel a sense of shame about that. And, I know although he was being playful, the intention is to make me less sensitive, and although that doesn't have malicious intent, it has painful side effects, which is that, the message that I receive is it's not okay to be sensitive, which for many people, especially men, emotionality is seen as having an inverse relationship to masculinity,
right? Especially
to masculine status. So for me, I started to really turn down my sensitivity, but you're still sensitive. It's just not expressed. It's more internalized. So what was fascinating about the fast and where I turned to sugar previously to help soothe the lack of the ability to self-express is I didn't get to do that. And so I got to experience, edges of grief, edges of like, oh, I got to be in this moment longer.
Which is part of the intent. There's an emotional aspect to the reset that I warn people about too.
I know you're like an alchemical wizard. I know all of that wasn't like, oh, here's some broth and some. It's like, here's a process that's going to fix your gut.
Because when you say sensitivity and you still feel sensitive, but you're holding it back, it's almost like you're robbing yourself of the tenderness and softness you deserve to give to yourself.
Right.
And so part of the fast is to make you sit there with that and be like, I have no other option but to be tender and soft and gentle with myself and journal all that, which you talked about in your voice updates. In addition to your stool, which I was joking with my friend Salema yesterday. I was like, I can't believe we've been friends for almost 10, 12 years now, and I've yet to take a stool sample from you. He's like, are we going there? I'm like, yep. Happy birthday. I need a stool sample.
That's a rite of passage. Yeah, I used to be a pharmaceutical rep, and I sold a product for irritable bowel syndrome. So at lunches, I used to have to talk about poo.
Yeah.
And like the Bristol stool chart, which is like, for you guys who don't know, is like a chart with pictures of different types of shapes of poo. And I remember you just got so numb to, which is not great when you're actually out with regular people who don't talk about poo all the time. But this.
My clients, the athletes especially, they're not used to the level of detail, even at an elite level.
That's funny.
And so the first day we have the conversation about collecting stool, it's like side eye. I had a soccer player avoid it for a few months, and I was like, at his house, I'm like, it's time now. You need to go in that bathroom
and take a couple
because
samples.
It's the only lab I'm missing. And then
That's
it becomes
funny.
comfortable, and then it becomes too comfortable. I get like updates I didn't even need about their stool.
It's amazing what you learn though by diving deep into the biome. When I was a rep, I worked in, as I said, the IBS, which is really in gastroenterology, and eventually worked with specialists, et cetera, et cetera. But what was fascinating is at the time we'd go to rounds all the time, morning rounds where they'd talk about patient cases. And I can remember no mention of the microbiome. I can remember that IBS is often correlated to, if you think about it, it's got motility, gut issues with motility correlated to nervous system activation, trauma. And so, fibromyalgia, all these different things that are correlated, that are gut related, nerve related. Anyways, what was fascinating is like, I remember there was this study they would talk about that was correlating sexual abuse to IBS, but they would be like, don't talk about that. And now I look back and I'm like, oh my God, like the gut, which the product I sold worked on the serotonin receptor. But I remember learning that 90 to 95% of your serotonin is in the gut, your receptors. Well, only until I started to study relationships and emotion was I realizing how significant that was.
Right.
And now it is still considered somewhat fringe to talk about the microbiome. Even you hear people, if you say the words functional medicine, they're like, and you're like, yo, you got to get with it. Like I saw the other day, Rolling Stone put out an article saying that what is up with the right wing obsessed with seed oils, saying that they're bad.
Right. I just don't pay attention to those articles, right? I'm really about mastering my own impact, right? I can pay attention to what's out there and get really frustrated with things like
Get
that.
mad.
Yeah, because I've been pushing my gut reset and gut health for 12 years, and people who've been doing it much longer than me, and it's only now starting to get cool, and I can get upset about how
It is cool
people
now.
are doing it wrong, or I can focus on mastering the influence in the circle that I have, and then hope that the people in my circle will go influence their circle. It's just a better use of my energy. I don't really like to get into the back. My friend Max is great at that. Lucifer, he's great at being like posting all that.
He's
and I'm
really
like,
going for it.
yeah, and I'm like I have my work to do, which is different than his work, so I let him handle those things. Can you talk about the jump from pharmaceutical sales to being a relationship expert? Do you even refer to yourself as a relationship? How do you introduce yourself today?
Oh man, yeah, it's like an evolution of my identity,
Which is healthy, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I've ever said that I'm a relationship expert, just because that I think creates the hierarchy that I'm like above or teaching from a pulpit. I really find myself in the soup with people because a lot of my work is actually expressing what I'm navigating or going through and what I've learned. I just happen to have an extreme fascination with science and human patterns. And really humans, like the way we express our dysfunction is actually not that complex, although we'd like to think that our unique set of circumstances is creating a unique way of responding or surviving, those circumstances, which is not to say that our experience isn't unique. It's just that we only have so many ways we can express our dysfunction or our function. So for me, I was just so fascinated by like the group of behaviors that go with different responses to different stimuli. And that stimuli could be pain. And I was more, as a rep, I was obsessed with trying to understand how to get a person to change their behavior and write a different product. Before I worked as pharma rep, I worked as a salesperson at a store called Future Shop. And it was
Future Shop?
Yeah, it was the Future Shop.
Real.
I know, right? It's like we're all like the Jetsons.
Yeah.
That's an age reference. But we had to wear suits. It was so like the 40-year-old virgin. It was so funny.
And you had to wear suits?
We wore suits.
Did you have a 40-year-old virgin in the store?
100p, like not even a question. But it was funny. But you had like all these. We all were your classic electronic sales guys.
Yeah.
But I was obsessed with understanding how to close people, how to change their behavior, how to build rapport.
Yeah, which is relationship skills.
Right, and I was good at it. And so I would read books on it. I would just study it. And then when I went to university, I did finance, which I never did that again. But in it, I paid for my university. No offense if you do finance, but that's got to be like taking an Ambien. And I've never even taken one of those. But if I know the reference. But in studying human behavior, I then in my late 20s, I'd gone through relationships that were very significant. When I was in my teens, I thought I was really good at love. I thought I was really good at relationships, which if you think you're really good at it, that's usually a good sign that you're probably a people pleaser and you're probably anxiously attached.
So did you think you were good because you were being a people pleaser?
Because I loved all out.
Okay.
I loved and other people betrayed me.
Okay.
Right? Like martyr, not seeing the feedback I was getting from the outcomes I was having in my relationships.
But you were doing that in sales effectively.
Yeah,
otherwise,
which was
how could
wild.
you close, right?
Right. So but I wasn't emotionally attached to a sale. That was different. I also wasn't mirroring my familial relationships in my sales. You know what I mean? It's like, wait, you don't want to buy? I feel rejected. You remind me of my mom, let me get you that extended warranty. But Future Shop was bought by Best Buy, and then it changed a little bit. It became like a little less aggressive. But that studying of human behavior is where it started, but it was more from a coercive perspective. And then when I was in my late 20s, I was engaged to a really fantastic woman who I went to college with. And I didn't want to get engaged. I didn't know why. We'd been together 5 years. All the check boxes of this is the next logical step, which I'm sure a lot of people know that line. And, at the time I was living the life that so many live. Go to school, take this, get this type of job. This is what's going to make you have value. Here, from my brain, it was like, get married by 25 to 27, have kids by 30, make sure you become a good provider. At the time, I was like, try to make 100,000 so you can pay for a house and have a picket fence. Now with inflation, it's like 400.
Yeah.
But when I woke up in that story, I realized there was this strange negotiation that was going on within me, which is it wasn't my story anymore. And I didn't know how to leave it. And I didn't know how to leave it because I saw that when other people left the story, got off the train of life, got divorced, left relationships, especially in their 20s. But of course, this is true for 40s, 50s, just the whole line. What I saw was that they've faced often shame from their communities, exile from their communities, especially in religious contexts, but it doesn't have to be. They were seen as failures. We didn't know how to end things with grace. So you see people saying, well, divorce is detrimental on children. Sure, but if you're on the rocks relationally, whether you're married or not, and you have kids, the optimum, of course, two people who love each other, who treat each other with respect and are together. But the second is two people who love each other, treat each other well, who aren't together, but together and hate each other and apart and hate each other. There's not a hierarchy to that. They're both dysfunction.
Right.
So I couldn't reconcile that. When I eventually left the engagement, so I got engaged despite not wanting to. And then as soon as we got engaged, I remember thinking to myself, I think I should be more happy than this. And that was strange because the whole reason I'd gotten engaged is because in my brain I thought, when I get engaged, I won't feel this angst anymore because I'll have pulled the trigger. I'm committing to this. Because what I heard from so many people when I would share my anxiety or my fear, they would say, you're just afraid of commitment. You're just a man. You're just afraid of commitment.
So for anyone who is feeling like they relate to what you're saying, because I say often, I took a very different path than most people. I've recognized most of that stuff in my 20s, and I would always say a lot of people know what they want their life to look like and will do anything to get that. And I know what I want my life to feel like, and I won't compromise anything for that. So you're having these feelings, I don't want to get engaged, or having these feelings of anxiety. You're confiding in people who are telling you, no, you're wrong. You're afraid of commitment. What were the aha signs teaching you to trust yourself that led you to the, no, I can't do this? What will help somebody understand or maybe relate to the, no, I'm not afraid of commitment. I definitely feel like that. But how do you get there when the voices around you are telling you, you'll be fine after you get married. You'll be fine after you have a kid.
Right.
You'll be fine
It'll
after
all
you
be better.
Yeah.
In hindsight, what that woke me up to was that almost everybody I knew was fighting this battle of who they desired to be versus who they were taught to be. That they had these dreams, they had these passions. They might be in a relationship they don't want to be in, or they might just not be expressing themselves. And so there's almost like this internal conflict that's going on to avoid external conflict. It just gets internalized. And of course that shows up as inflammation, and it's this
This
conflict.
is a performance podcast after all.
Let's get back to inflammation. And truthfully, you can look at the research, high conflict relationships are correlated to leaky gut, inflammatory responses.
Shows up as
delayed
back pain,
healing,
headaches, all the above.
Right. And so what I started to witness in myself was this, what I desired and what I wanted to create was in conflict with what I was taught to desire and create.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we all face many whys in the road that are like this. They're like, are you going to do what you desire? Are you going to follow what is your passion? Or are you going to continue? And for some people, they'll continue. I continued till that moment where I was like, I can't do this. I'm building a life that I don't even want.
Mm-hmm.
And I then could see so many people in lives they didn't want. And I thought, how are we all so asleep to this?
Yeah.
And first I'll explain, like, one of the things that really shifted me is I wrote on this website. It was called The Runaway Bride. It's no longer around, which is unfortunate because I'd love to see my forum posts. But I posted
There's no
on it.
techie nerd that could get in there and find it. I've been
Yeah, I
watching
need
too much NCIS. We
I
need
know.
like
I need a hacker.
Abby Shudo and
I need
McGee over here.
Anonymous to get in there and save my forum post. But I shared how I felt, how I was feeling. And the site was, I believe, a woman who'd left a marriage.
Mhm.
But then it became this place of support for people who were unsure about weddings and marriages, which, like, talk about a beautiful space, because what I noticed is that if I went to someone I knew, and not everyone was like, you're afraid of commitment. There were a few who are like, hey, you got to do you. Like, we got you. We love you no matter what you choose. And that's the first thing I'd say to people is, like, no matter what you choose, it has nothing to do with your worth or your value. Like, the choice is so not correlated, but because society wants to keep people in things or keep people aligned to what they would consider the right choices, then you will experience externalized projected shame. You have the decision to be discerning about placing it in accordance with your worth, which is, of course, what I would refer to as growing up, right? Like, that's adulting, but most of us are stuck in developmental phases of adolescence or childhood because we just haven't had a modeled, like, where was the human who said, if you leave, we love you.
Right.
You made a mistake. Let's talk about it. What did you learn? That type of container can even foster a deeper connection within a relationship, right? Because the truth gets laid at the altar of the relationship. They get to say, we're not good.
Right.
I'm thinking of leaving. Well, that's true anyways.
Right.
So you might as well deal with it instead of going out more, cheating, lying, or just internalizing, disassociating, hiding. And so I post on the forum, and what I loved was that, like, none of these people cared what I chose. They just wanted me to find peace and liberation.
Right.
They just wanted me free from, like, what felt like, heaviness, what other people might refer to as, like, demons, like, hitting me hard, gut issues, the gamut when you're in that state of stress, you're avoiding hard conversations. And because I want to finish that other thought, is like, what I saw was that people that I knew would often give me advice based on their fears. And so I realized, don't go to people you know, go to people you don't know, because they don't care. They're like, but if someone else is afraid their partner's going to leave them, they're going to tell you to stay.
I wouldn't say they don't care. They just offer a different perspective because they're not tied to see the outcome all the time.
Wrong term.
Like, people care. It's just the people closest to you, they're going to project no matter what.
Right. And they're like the stranger.
Well, no matter what. There's some solid friends. I don't want to offend any of my friends. Some of you guys are great.
Well, yeah, and they don't, what I mean is, like, the outcome of your relationship has no impact on them, really. They just want you to be happy, for the most part. Not all strangers want you to be happy. There's a few trolls on the internet who are there specifically to make you upset. But yeah, so...
Keep trying, suckers.
Right? I write this post, and there's this woman who replies, and she asked me 3 questions. She says, if she left you tomorrow, would you be okay? And I was like, oh yeah, I'd be relieved. I think there's, like, a solid part of being in a healthy relationship that you can survive a departure.
Right.
At the time, I was like, whew,
Yeah.
Second one was, could you imagine what it would be like waiting for her at your altar, whatever the altar is? And I was like, that, like, gave me anxiety.
Yeah.
And the third question was, could someone else love her better?
Ooh.
That one got me because I had not considered the circumstances through her lens, that, like, me afraid to choose her was actually not allowing her to experience the love she was so worthy of. And, like, to whoever got to be in a relationship with her, they would be the luckiest person. And so that completely shifted me.
Where is this woman?
She's married now and has a family, and
No, not the one you broke up with. The woman that asked those questions. Like those are rock star questions.
I know.
Thoughtful questions.
She's a mystical angel. Who knows? She's a troll who was there to get me out of something. She's the hacker we need.
Yeah.
But that was the perspective shift I needed, because it made it not about me and my fear of what people would think of me. It actually made it about the connection and her worthiness and what she actually deserved. And of course, the follow-up question to that is, do you want to?
Mm-hmm.
If there's a gap between, could someone else love her better? And your answer is yeah. I mean, maybe you're taking them for granted. Maybe you've forgotten about making deposits in the relationship.
Yeah.
So of course, the follow-up question is, do you want to step up?
Yeah.
Because if you don't, someone will.
Yeah.
Or they'll step out, right? Or leave, and not just step out. I know that's a reference to another, but that really all of a sudden made it like, okay, this isn't just about me. And I can't look at her now and see what she is worthy of and not see that I'm actually holding her back. I didn't want to. I didn't know why. I just didn't want to. And I couldn't make it make sense. That's what I spent most of my time doing, was trying to figure out that the answer was anything but it was. What was my problem that I couldn't choose this, as opposed to this is just not an aligned choice?
Did she ever try to talk to you about that? Did she pick up on that anxiety, doubt?
Yeah, we had talks about it. Like, I wasn't just navigating this on my own.
Yeah.
We talked about my anxiety, my fear. I couldn't set a date.
Yeah.
I was very transparent about these things. And she was like, all right, let's talk about it. Let's work through it. Do you want to see someone? I was like, yes, no. But, yes, no. But yes, so then I left. And I went to this therapist from your employee assistance program. Like, so they don't really want to be there. They're getting like $52 an hour when they normally make $200. So I go to this guy. I'll never forget it. Because we went to break up, and then she was like, you should go see someone, even go deeper on this. And I was like, that's true. Okay. So walk into this guy's office. And he's like, what are you here for? I tell him my debacle. And he goes, listen, even when people think they know that they want to get married, 50% of the time they're wrong. And I was like, wow, this is a real Tony Robbins motivational speech. Then he goes, and even for the people who end up getting divorced and think they figured it out, they get married again. And they're 70% of the time they're wrong. And I was like, wow, we're really going for it here. And then he said, when you walked in here, you knew you better than anyone knows you. You were seeking an answer. And he said, but I cannot give it to you. You already know. And I walked out and ended it. I felt like 1,000,000 pounds lifted off my shoulders. I felt like no longer was I abiding by the rules of how to be in life and who to be. Because it was one of the first times I ever chose me at the cost of belonging, which was like, it's still an ongoing adventure, of course, because that's healing the need to be authentic versus the need to belong. And for most of us, we'll abandon authenticity for belonging. If it costs us our family, our culture, our relationships, of course. But it costs us ourselves. And I looked back and I was like, how did I get here? Like, how did I get to this place where I feel so disconnected from myself? I walked another human down this path because I just wasn't self-aware. I was afraid. I had a pattern. And, as we were referencing earlier, I was friggin' great at communicating in sales. But when it came to love, I was not. And I was like, what got me here? And my answer immediate was like, you avoided every hard conversation.
What you were saying earlier about having the hard conversation, saying something's not working, something's not right, it made like a little pang of hurt in my heart, because I'm someone who wants to have the hard conversations. I'm the person that's like, hey, I can tell something's shifted, and if you need to go, you have my blessing to go, because your happiness comes before anything. And that has always been triggering for the person on the other side, where they're almost upset at my comfort level with accepting that maybe they want to move on. So it's me being very patient with understanding that a lot of people have work to do to understand that it's okay if it ends. There is no shame if it ends. There is no exile. There's no me hating you because you didn't choose me type of thing.
Right. But for most humans' experience, the shame they get from their parent for not behaving, accommodating, aligning, choosing something, like
It's jarring when someone's sitting across to them saying like, hey, it's okay.
I love you no matter what. Like, yeah, right.
And they get really, really, really upset. And then for me, my end of it, which we've talked about this before, I get like hurt. I'm like, wait, I'm so confused. I'm giving you a container of honesty and letting you let me know how you feel. And my tenderness and understanding is like dagger to it. And I refuse to let it make me cold or be like, I'm going to be mad at you because you don't want to talk to me type of thing. So it's nice to hear you say those things for people who step closer to being like, oh, it's okay if things end, and they don't have to end in a terrible way. They can end. I always say the one thing I can promise in any relationship, romantic or not, is kindness and honesty, and kindness in my honesty.
Yeah. Well, you look, like most people grew up in families and cultures that their role in the family was about pivoting around a truth. An alcoholic, a narcissist, an abuser, someone who doesn't show up, someone who works all the time. And there can be reasons for someone who works all the time. I'm not removing context or compassion, because we often think that is the removal of it. We can have both hands. But, we all take on roles that we call personality that are really survival strategies that
100%.
We then attach our identity to. That's why it's so hard to shift in order to grow relationships and develop relationships, because we have to actually experience the death of a pattern, which we are a death phobic culture and we are a truth phobic culture. It's been I don't know how many years since it's been proven that the government has lied to the people, but we're still like, they don't do that anymore. Just like in relationship, we pivot around truths, and then when one person orients to the truth, the system attacks the person because the system has to change. Everyone's role has to change if someone says, oh yeah, dad is a narcissist, everyone's like, we don't talk about that. Right? Like,
do you watch Bear?
Oh yeah,
The Bear? Did you see the 7 fishes?
Yet,
okay, and then watch it. Come back to me on it. It's the Christmas
dinner. It's a good show, but man, it's dysregulating.
That episode, particularly across the board, everyone I've talked to is like, I had to fast forward. That was so triggering. It was like, nobody wants to admit how triggering that is and how toxic it is. And I mean, across the board, everyone I knew was like, that is some version of my family and how I was raised. And it tells you a lot about the characters and how they developed. But when you get to that episode, I think it'll touch on what you're saying. Okay, so this therapist says to you, you have the answer, you leave 1,000 pounds lighter, and then you create an Instagram handle called Create the Love.
Hey, that's exactly what happened. Instagram did not exist yet. I become obsessed with understanding why we shame people whose relationships end. Here's how strong our bias is. And I, at the time I'd known about cognitive dissonance and confirmation bias, but not at the level where I was living cognitive dissonance and bias. Because if I had acknowledged it, I would have had to deal with it, which, hey, we all have some, get on it. I started to study relationships. I had already had this background in studying clinical trials and learning papers and criticisms and all that kind of stuff and selling based on them, that I was like, I'm going to dive deep in the research of relationships. What makes them work? What makes them not? Why do people stay together and love each other? What's different about them? And why do people stay together and hate each other? That made no sense to me. But because my bias was so strong, I grew up Catholic. I consider myself now a recovering Catholic. But I was like, the bias that I had was that I would look and I did not see these divorces happening. I wasn't registering them. They were happening, but I wasn't registering relational endings. In my brain, the story went, you marry someone in your 20s, you have kids by 30, and you stay together forever, and you love each other. And I was like, I got out of my engagement, and I was like, that's not happening.
Right.
Like, does anyone else see this bullshit? And no, not many people did. But then I realized how long I'd been lied to about relationships. Then I read this book, first book that really shattered how I thought about myself and my purpose on the planet, was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And he has a line in it where he says, to live is to suffer, but to survive is to find meaning in your suffering. And here is this guy who faced the ultimate suffering. and still found love and unconditional love and purpose and meaning. And I was like, wait, I'm actually here to do something other than just be a biological being who's like poops and eats and sleeps and bangs, So I was like, I actually have a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
What is my purpose? And the pain that was moving through me, the curiosity, this is why I don't think anyone's suffering is by accident. It's like, it's all shaping you. It's inviting you to step into mastery into something. And I was like, I'm going to become so fucking good at this.
Mm-hmm.
And my motivation was to avoid suffering, right? Like the motivation was to avoid something rather than to deepen, which I think is an interesting thing about humans is usually our motivations, I'm going to use the term, are dark. Like they're like dark motivations. Like to repair something, to heal, to avoid something.
Yeah.
And then they become, our coping mechanisms are dark, our motivations are light. But like our coping mechanisms to avoid something are usually
There's that
like
one
drinking.
thing about seek joy or avoid pain as motivations. Because I was asked that question by someone. Do you do what you do to seek joy or avoid pain? And I didn't understand the question, which is a whole other topic. Which I can get into, but it was I was like, I cannot compute.
Not registering as ChatGPT. I was avoiding pain, but I was also following joy, which was really interesting. Like it was bringing me alive to now be like, no one talks about this. No one's teaching this. Why is no one teaching this? Like this is the most important skill that will determine your health, your life quality, your lifespan.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the fuck?
I just see you in a valley with a book, closing it, being like, does everyone know this? And it's just echoing across the valley.
It was crazy. So I went back to school. I studied positive psych because I was like, positive psychology is this obsession with the science.
This was after finance? So it went finance
and then
this
was
back.
After my engagement ended. I finished finance at 21, became a rep at 22, 27, got engaged, ended the engagement at 27, and then went back into school I applied, I got back into school at 30-ish or 31. And at that point, I was like, made rules. Like, I'm going to have every conversation I don't want to have. Mm-hmm. And then I adjusted that rule to as soon as I need to have it because I would delay. I was a master. I was like, I'll just have it in like a week. But I was dating this girl.
I'm the opposite. I'm the want to have it right away, and I need to like take a beat. Not everyone wants to like go in and fix it.
Well, the first time I ever journaled is because I was dating this girl. I didn't want to date her anymore. I was like, I'll just tell her in like a week. Man, I think I waited 2. And when I finally told her, she said to me, this is why I love like savage women. It might not register for us what you say at the time, but I can look back at conversations that altered some cells in my body that like a year later, I was like, oh, so it does shift something.
She sounds like my people.
It's not already all for nothing. Yeah, I've been in a relationship with quite a few of them. And she said to me, you knew this 2 weeks ago and you didn't tell me. And you let me go deeper as you were leaving. And I was like, and this level of like call to my integrity, that's really what started. It was like, I knew that the first time I put pen to paper, keyboard to whatever, screen, I couldn't write something about relationship that I wasn't living. Mm-hmm. So there was like this moment where I first hit publish that was like, you can't go back to, it wasn't referred to as fuck boy, but I couldn't go back to like situationships. I couldn't go back to being out of integrity. I couldn't go, they're all my ways of controlling intimacy, of avoiding depth. They had to die. Again, like I was talking, we're such a death phobic culture that we think big D, like actually dying, mortality, but there are so many small d deaths that we do not let complete. We hold on to things that are like, I am decaying. And we're like, just come along a little longer. It's like, old survival strategies, old ways of being, old relationships. Like some people get married at like 20. And then at 52, they're like, I don't know why I feel so disconnected. Well, none of us taught the relationship skills to keep two people whole. First off, to have a self in a relationship. Most challenges that happen at 40, 50, 60, 70 for people in relationship is they've forgotten about themselves. They have a strange call to individuate again. Their individuation threatens the unity of the relationship because the relationship is actually about completing each other or abandoning yourself to be in it, to have a need, to create, to help fix someone, to have a problem that someone needs to fix. And so when we hit those real big ruptures, we are not seeing that what we're trying to do is come alive again. And the relationship, if it's not a place that brings you alive, if we're in a relationship and I'm not like, what do you love? Like, what do you want to do? We get out of relationships and all of a sudden we're like, I can dream again.
Which is wild to me.
Fucking crazy.
So I want to talk about people who are late bloomers and have had autonomy their entire adult lives. But before I get into your thoughts on that, still don't know where Create the Love came from. It's my favorite thing about you is your storytelling. And I always want to keep you like going.
This is actually, of course, birthed from relationship. I was dating this really amazing girl, and she had just gotten out of a relationship right before we started dating. Classic move that I used to have when I dated unavailable people. I was like, I got you. Like, I'll help you heal. And then once you're healed, you'll be like, I don't need him anymore. Oh, this is why I can call out all the patterns, because I've tried to express all of them.
Yeah.
I've been unavailable and I've dated unavailable. Mastered
this bed's too soft. This bed's too hard.
Dude,
this porridge is too hot.
And like I could follow all the signs, now in whenever you draw the map looking back, you're like, I fucking knew then. Like, anyways, she did social media for companies. And she was like, you should start an Instagram that you want to talk about all the things you want to talk about. I was like, I don't know. And at the time I'd been writing. And so like my blogs had gone, a few of them had gone pretty viral. I was working as a coach. I hadn't left pharma yet, but I was like bridging my way out. And, I remember going to this seminar where Lisa Nichols, she was like, don't quit your job to pursue your dream. Like, that's just dumb. Like, you can't eat, she might not have said dumb. She was probably more graceful. But she was like, you can't eat, you can't pay your rent. How's that romantic or inspiring? She's like, use your job as the investor.
100%.
And so that reframe was like, oh shit, yeah. So I used work avenues, and work helped pay for my school. Like, I was like, I'm going to double down on all this. And when we broke up, I started an Instagram. And so I would just post a quote.
We broke up. She broke up with you. You broke up with her.
Yeah, it's always a good question because when someone's like, we, and they're like, who initiated? She initiated. Through her behavior, she initiated anyways. Yeah. But yeah, I remember going over to her house for the final conversation. And I remember I had yogurt in a plastic container. And
things we remember.
This is actually pretty funny because I remember thinking, should I bring this in to eat it? And I put it down on the floor and I was like, I'll be back in a few minutes. So that was like, right? I walked right in. This isn't working. Yeah. Well, clearly it isn't. But what a gift, because you think of all the synchronistic moments.
Right.
Although that was, a challenging ending. Without that ending, I wouldn't have created Create the Love. And the reason I called it Create the Love is because I wanted to call it Create the Love You Want, but you couldn't fit that. So it's not some genius branding move. It was like Create the Love, which, interesting now because I look back and I had worked with other people who did branding and had navigated their own development of brands and self. And if I was to start again, I wouldn't create the brand specifically as a name. I would make it me.
I'm going through the same thing.
Because it allows the evolution of you as a person.
I hate Paleo Chef.
Right. And it becomes this, my friend who does branding, she said, it's so fascinating. You think Create the Love is this big thing and you're this little thing, but actually you're the big thing and Create the Love's the little thing. And I was like, oh, that's such a powerful shift. So that's how I started it. And then I would post every day and write about a quote. Back then you couldn't edit. So if you go back, there's some spelling errors, there's some issues. And so the images were often cloudy, and shit. There's spelling errors in the fucking meme. That was the worst. But I remember people would say to me, you can't post written stuff on Instagram. It's a photography app. And at that point I was like, burn bitches. I have no interest in all your rules. I spent most of my life abandoning myself so I could get your applause.
Will you, if you haven't already, one day just step into open mic and do some stand-up?
I did a keynote.
Bitches.
I did a keynote a couple weeks ago, and after they're like, that felt like a stand-up special.
100%.
And I was like, sweet. And I thought, maybe I'll go in a stand-up, but they have to work so late. I'd rather just, speak at events.
I said just one night, just one open mic.
Yeah, it'd be fun.
A stand-up I should try
bit, just to creative edge.
You have all the content, right? You're just storytelling.
That's true.
And the way you tell stories has these zingers. It's amazing.
Well, I appreciate that. I've never told the yogurt story, so that's good. But yeah, so that's what birthed it. And then it just started to catch fire. And, I think I know you talk about this too, but for me, people would look back and they'd be like, oh, back then there wasn't like a virality to a post.
Mm-hmm.
I, for 8 years, posted at least once a day, up to 3 times a day,
Mm-hmm.
never missed a day. And for about 7 of those years, every day was original content. I started to repost old stuff because I was like, shit. And some old stuff, I was like, I don't think that way anymore. It's cool to watch the evolution. Someone will go back and be like, that was misogynist. That was, it's like, dude, it was like 2013.
Yeah.
I remember I used to have titles of articles that eventually some angry person would dig up and be like, that's a misogynist title. I'm like, listen, it was different then.
Right.
Allow people to grow, allow people to change. If 21-year-old me was given relationship advice, hell no.
So not 21-year-old you, but the evolution of Create the Love and you being so revered in the way that you are, what is some relationship advice you gave maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago that you would, nope, I rescind that.
Yeah, I already
Control,
know.
Alt, Delete.
Yeah, I think it was, so there was a real viral article written by Mark Manson. Great writer, incredible teacher. And it was called The Law of Fuck Yes or No, or The Law of Fuck Yes. And basically the premise of it, he does explain further, but the premise that people captured from it was if it's not a fuck yes, it's a hell no, right? I think most of us are probably familiar with that line, which I think he's kind of the original person on that. What I saw in relationship, I was like, oh yeah, if it's not a fuck yeah, it's a hell no. And what I started to see is that as I developed a deeper connection with Kylie, which it was always like a deeper, yeah. But there were moments where I was like, no. You know what I mean? You're not always going to like your partner, but you'll hopefully always love them.
And you guys separated.
Yeah, we broke up for 9 months. And it was over when we broke up. We were not getting back together in my head, for sure. I was like, I'm done with this.
And you'd come to a beautiful, painful piece with it because we had a chat in front of Erwan about it.
Yeah, all good chats happen in front of Erwan as your bank account leaks out your pocket because you just bought a $27 coffee and wonder what has happened to life. They used to be 5 cents in the 50s. See, maybe that's why I like those cars. I want to bring back the
you
cost
think it'll
of
bring
living.
back the coffee?
Yeah, gas was like 11 cents or something. Yeah, when I look back at the advice. So I would often say things like, if it doesn't feel this, if it doesn't, and that's because I was still experiencing that. That was the reality of and that's why I think really the depth anyone can teach is the depth they've embodied. You can know something, but words hit different when someone's living them. Because you could have someone academic write about knowledge about a book, but if they haven't actually lived it, it's different. It's academic. It's cerebral.
I talk about this with researchers who want to fight me on things I've learned in the field through practical application. They're like, well, the research says. I go, well, the championship that we just won says.
You're like, how's this ring? How do you like them apples?
Because I think not to discredit researchers, someone who writes a book, they've become an expert at what they've researched.
And their identity becomes tied to that research.
And there's a beautiful overlap of one will allow it with learning from the person who's experienced it and the person who's experiencing it being able to draw from the research, because we have to give context to everything now.
Yeah, of course. I think it's when the identity becomes tied to the outcome or the research. Look, we see that all the time in science, that new truths come alive and the people who studied the old ones don't want their identity to die, their validation, their status. And so I just found if you've ever read Women Who Run with Wolves, it's technically for women, but holy shit, when I read it, I was like, this is some of the most savage, embodied, powerful writing.
I like that you said new truths that emerge, because in relationships, new truths can emerge
all the time
as well.
You're changing, they're changing.
And how do you show up each time for that? I love having one-on-ones with friends and partners, and we can talk about your guys' closing ceremony as well, and what I call an exit interview.
Yeah, which I like that.
But to summarize the advice you would change is, you used to say, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. And now
Yeah.
it's like, no, it's a hell, maybe.
Yeah, like Alison Armstrong had this advice where she said, if it's a 10 out of 10 attraction, don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that's such bullshit.
10 out of 10, like
you're
across the
losing
board,
your
attraction, physical attraction, emotional attraction. What does 10 out of 10
physical.
mean? Okay.
And I now agree with that.
Yeah, I'm like, oh,
they're
you're very
so
good
attractive,
looking. Please don't ever call me.
Right. Like if your system is coding this as extreme chemistry, it's likely that your brain is going to go in the toilet.
What do you think about, because I'm not, I mean, in business, I'm a hell yes, hell no when I'm making decisions about that. But when it comes to dynamics, it's am I still curious?
That's exactly if someone says to me, how do I orient to dating? Now you're telling me to go to hell no's, I'm like, no, let's calm down there. Don't be doing that. Trust the hell no. It's, am I still curious? Is there more to learn here? Mm-hmm. Am I looking forward to seeing them again?
And do they feel the same?
Well, they better fucking feel the same. If they don't, it's if someone doesn't.
Some people will still be like, but I'm still curious. I still want to explore this. No. And it's like, you both have to be willing to explore.
To the curb.
Yeah.
That's something I've always said from very early is like, do not attach or give someone the title of the one.
Yeah.
Early, because they might become not the one real quick. And then you'll want to stay with them because you told all your friends. And allow someone to become, because what it does is it allows you to stay in discernment. Most of us don't think of ourselves as we're dating to find someone. We think we're dating for someone to like me. And so we're not orienting to dating or relating from the place of discernment is this a good choice for me? I could tell you 100% of the time, if someone doesn't want what you want, they're not a good choice for you. Second, if you're afraid that if you tell someone what you want, it's going to push them away, that's actually brilliant.
Right.
That's actually the design.
Right.
If they don't want what you want, they're not your person. Here's a massive qualifier for a good relationship. Mm-hmm. They choose you too. It's so rational, but most of us do not even think that way. We spend so much of our time trying to move and pretzel ourselves in a relationship, work. That's why none of it's different. It's like, excelling fitness-wise, excelling as mental, emotional, relational, it's all the same stack of behaviors. Are you discerning? Are you disciplined? Are you willing to grow? Are you listening to the feedback from your body? Mm-hmm. That's why you can see people who have mastery in body who don't have mastery in relationship. That's for sure, because they're sometimes escaping mastery in relationship through body mastery, or they're like soothing something. I think I see that a lot in like extreme athletes, where they're running 100 miles and they're like, what about love?
No, actually.
Not always true.
No, I want to pivot to
Just
this because this
true.
is I asked a few people in my life who are high performing. And this is, I don't expect you to have the answer, but your perspective would be cool. Let's see. I'm around a lot of high performers. Their craft is their one, right?
Agreed,
their craft is their everything. Their schedule is that. And some of them have excelled so much in that because that gets all their attention. So they feel like they're lacking when it comes to being able to show up in relationships, even though they want to. And then there's others who are having a hard time finding people who understand the level of performance they're at.
The level of commitment to their craft.
Right. And then they get told, if you don't give attention to the relationship the way we've been taught, you're going to doomed to be alone or doomed to not be in a relationship that feels equal. So one of the questions I got asked to ask was, how do people who are high performing create balance or harmony in that? Because they're not trying to escape something. They just have this deep calling for what they do. And they sometimes do feel like they're going to have a mismatched relationship or be a soloist.
If you ask someone to push aside their purpose for the relationship, one, whoever's asking that is really testing the person. Will you give up what you love for me? Which now I won't respect you because you gave up what you love for me. It's a strange test. It's a trap.
It's an episode of Grey's Anatomy.
It really is. It's such a trap. Can we be in our purpose and also make our relationship our purpose? There's this, because it can be a both and. Now, granted, if you're training and you're a professional athlete, I get the time investment is into that first. And it's also your dream, your passion. It's also allowing you to provide, likely, you know?
Yeah, not just for your family, but a lot of the people I work with, they provide for the community.
Right.
Much bigger
right.
than them. And I asked that question for myself. I'm very autonomous. I'm very focused. And when I do sit in front of someone who says they want to date me, I let them know it's really important to me that you have purpose. This is more than I've ever shared. And I say, you know, I hope I'm not your priority. And I hope you understand that you won't be my priority. There are things that are to come before you, my health, my craft. And then when I'm with you, I'm with you. But when I'm not with you, I need your trust and space to do what it is I'm trying to accomplish in my life. And I get told, it's so masculine of you.
Right.
That's not the way in quotations it's supposed to be. And it's just so interesting to hear that, because most of the time I don't buy into it, but sometimes I'm like, well, I always want to play devil's advocate. I'm like, maybe I'm doing something wrong. Maybe there does have to be a shift or a balance to create it. But if I had to choose, I'm going to choose my passion all day long. So that question comes selfishly, but also the friends that ask me came particularly from my female friends who are high performing, where it's like, how do you create that balance?
Right.
Is
it's
that
such a
real?
good question today, because of course, you know, we look at what have men been taught about creating space in relationship. And we're talking, of course, heteronormatively. It's like, how does a man feel powerful and revered in a positive way if he has been taught that his power is in providing? So we've really taught women that they can be anything, which is beautiful, but we haven't really put the same time and value into men being able to step into, let's say, the caretaking role. Often that's even shamed, right? And so it's like, how do we create space so men know how to be with a powerful woman and that not actually be attached to his worth, right? And that's the work, because like, can you be with someone who is shining? You know, I saw this amazing reel the other day. I wish I knew who the person was who said it, but he said, if you love a woman abundantly, she will bring abundance into your life. And I was like, oh, that's good. Because like, if I start to think scarcely about love and dedication and investing in whatever passions my partner has, it will be tenfold.
And that's any partnership. It doesn't have to be a hetero
But most of us
partnership.
are exactly like, these dynamics will exist regardless of the gender combination. There's usually someone who is more the chaser and someone who's more the runner. There's usually someone who's more like, I want to caretake, I want to take care of things. You know, the ultimate answer to this is you have to be very clear about who you are, what you desire, what your passions are. The one thing I would say that adds a little softness to the invitation to partnership is to say, my purpose and my passion is the most important thing in my life. You are the most important human in my life. And what that does is, that's ultimately the baseline of every relationship, no matter what, but especially romantic. What the question that's always being asked unconsciously is, if something goes wrong, will you be there for me?
You have my back.
Right. And if the answer is no, you will not feel psychologically safe, whether you're conscious of it or not. You won't feel psychologically safe to open up, to open further. Because why would you? You're going to invest in this thing that's going to be over? That makes no sense. So that is always happening. But what people want to hear is, you're the most important person and I'm not going anywhere. And you just have to be very explicit. Like if you're an athlete, anyone who's really deep in their purpose, like Kylie knows that I'm not abandoning my purpose for her. She would never want me to. She wouldn't respect me if I did. And when I look at the stuff she steps into and says, I'm like, it's hot. I want her to burn shit down. I want her to light fires. I'm like, damn. Sometimes she puts on these like gowns and I'm like, whoa, you look like a witch. It's like a hot witch, you know, like, it's just such a powerful thing to think, how is this relationship a container for both of us to individually come alive? Now, I can understand that when you're dealing with things like status of an athlete, right? Female athlete, female performer, high performer. You need to find a male who's also in a zone, you know, if you're heterosexual. But you just need to find a partner who's also got a purpose. Like, you think, why do people who have celebrity-ish status tend to be drawn to other people who have quote unquote celebrity-ish status. It's because there's an understanding of the other person's world. Now, it doesn't mean it can't obviously work in any, but we just have to be clear. This is what I'm looking for. This is what I want. And are we actually showing up to that? Because a lot of the times we say we're looking for something and we're not showing up. Well, I want honesty. And then you're a liar. Like, well, I'm sorry, that ain't going to happen. You know what I mean?
People don't love honesty.
Well, listen, to me, love is truth.
100%.
Love is telling the truth. If you are not telling the truth, you are not being loving. And you might say, well, it's for love. No, it's not. That's a lie. That's self-abandonment. Now, granted, there are going to be caveats. I'm sure someone watching is like, but 99, it's not always true.
Right.
Sometimes you need for survival. So contextualize all that. But if you are not telling the truth to the people in your life, that is not loving.
There's telling the truth. There's being forthcoming, which I think some people play around the nuance of those things. But what I'm hearing is there really isn't going to be balance in a high-performing duo. There's going to be harmony and understanding.
Well, it depends how you define balance.
Well, I define balance in my own unbalanced way by comparison to the way most people find balance. Anytime I see a therapist for the first time, they're like, you work too much. I'm like, wrong therapist, gotta go.
Yeah.
No one told Kobe to work less hard. Like,
right.
So it's context.
Well, again, there's the person who doesn't know, right? Like when we engage in a relationship with someone who isn't living it, you got to go to mentors and teachers who are embodying, like, go find someone who's a high performer who has an amazing relationship. There are those people, you know.
Shout out Alexis and Serena.
Right.
The way he's in the stands, just like number one fan.
It's everywhere. And we can't learn from people who don't know that balance, who also, someone who's like, I only work 4 hours a day, that's amazing for them. But if you go to them and you're like, I work 14 hours when things are bumping, or 18, they're like, oh no, what about bubble baths? And you know, and again, that's for them, but they're not your teacher.
Right.
You know, when I think about even the idea of work-life balance, which is like your classic corporate term,
right?
It's bullshit, because there is only life and there's what you put in life. And my question is what you're putting in your life bringing you alive or not? Mm-hmm. If it's not bringing you alive, now what I always hear back to that, now I have a kid, so I have context, but I will hear someone say, well, I don't like changing diapers. Am I supposed to just stop doing that? These are classic cynics, because they're not willing to accept their power. So they're like, I'll just turn this power off or try to turn him down. You know, and so now I get it. It's like, yeah, I don't like changing diapers. I don't like getting peed on by my kid. But it's part of, when I think about the contribution to where it's going, is like, I'm showing up. That kid's being loved as he's hitting me with the urine. You know, I got to dodge it every once in a while, you know. But for parents, they understand what I'm talking about.
Or older siblings.
Yeah, that's true.
10 years between me and my sister.
That type, when contribution is about a greater mission, you know, Mark Manson has a great article where he says, everything you do, you have to eat a shit sandwich. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yeah, it's so true.
I tweeted last night, all roads are tough. You have to choose the one you know you won't be sorry for taking. And that's by Chris Berkman.
Yeah, I feel like I read that recently too.
Yeah, I read it initially in a hotel in Tennessee.
That's where all great books are read. Okay,
so we talked about a breakup that led you to create the love. And then, you know, usual advice is don't go back to exes. That's not my advice. That's what you hear. Like, sharks don't swim backwards. Don't go back to exes. Which
they don't. That's true.
You and Kai got back together. Mm-hmm. You got married.
She's my baby mama now.
And how old are you again?
44.
Which, again, late bloomers when it comes to you fall in love before, but getting married, starting a family type of thing. And so talk about what led you guys to the end and things that people can draw from.
Well, we were together 5 years when we decided to part. So, you know, we'd done everything to figure it out. You know, we'd seen therapists, we'd done weekend escapes with, you know, teachers. We were doing individual work. We both taught stuff on relationship. You know, we were like deep in it. And I mean, it was the ultimate space of education, because You can't lead people through things you haven't walked through. And man, we were being walked through a pretty powerful experience. And early in our relationship, I remember just feeling like she was a bit distant. And I said to her, like, I feel like I'm chasing you and you're always running. And I was like, and I don't want to chase you. Like, I have no interest in being in a relationship with someone I chase. And she was like, yeah, like, I hear you. And I had this dream. And in my dream, the house was burning and I had to leave. And it was our relationship. Like, I was feeling called to leave. And she's like, but it doesn't make sense because I love you and I want to be in this relationship. And so I'm just going to be here. Right. So that's like a year in. Now, like, we've had this conversation and she's like, I'm choosing this. I'm in it. But at the baseline of her unconscious or conscious is, am I going to have to go? I had this dream. It was powerful. I don't want to go. What's wrong with me that I might have to leave this? I'm going to stay and do everything. In my unconscious, and it would sometimes gnaw at me consciously, it was, she might leave at any time. So, how am I supposed to fully dive in, fully invest? And it was my relational pattern was that I felt like I was in relationship with people who didn't fully choose me. And so fast forward now, we're at year 5 and she just can't go all in. We had very early dating. I was like, here's when I want to have kids. Does that work for you? Yeah. Oh yeah, it works.
How early?
I said like in 2 years or 3 years.
Okay. No, we're not talking week 2.
No. Listen,
for those love bombers.
Yeah. No, that red flag. It was like I said in about 2 years I'd like to start. She was like, that works for me. But then as we're getting close to the timing, she's like, hey, I know you said about 2 or 3 years, I forget. She was like, can we move it like another year? And I was like, yeah, that feels okay. But now we're in like year 5 and it's been moved a few times. But because it's been moved a few times, the conversation is not about kids. It's about why you're moving a deal breaker. That was me. I was like, you keep moving this deal breaker, but it's not about the deal breaker. It's about the container we're creating that would allow us to have a solid enough relationship to create children, which I understand her resistance, but it was like, we have to get to the resistance. So I remember standing in the kitchen where so many conversations happen. And I was like, I want to create a life. I want to have kids. I want to create an epic partnership and I want to do it with you. But if you don't want to do it, can't do it for whatever reason, I love you. And talk about full circle moment, because that is desperately what I wish someone would have said to me at 27 was like, you're loved. And I was like now able to face the mirror of where I was. And I truly felt that, like, I love you. Like, this is going to be painful for me and you, but this relationship must be in service of truth. And if the truth is you can't fully choose it for whatever reason, I also understood that sometimes you just don't know why. But I had to trust that she was being called somewhere, which meant I was being called somewhere. And that's a strange thing to recognize in a partnership, but in any relationship, is that whenever anyone is being called to something, you just might not be seeing what you're being called to. And so the wisdom that's innate in the other person has to be honored, even if it means pain for us. In saying all this, I can't believe this was actually something that I was able to be with, because it was happening in real time. It was like a new me was like, we were creating new skills, a new way, a new possibility. I said to her, like, if part of the identity you have to be in this relationship is that you're broken, that there's something wrong with you, that you can't choose this, then we can't be in a relationship, because that's not healthy. There's nothing wrong with you. And I was like, imagine if there's something right with you. And, I think for a lot of women, that idea that their wisdom is revered, that it's honored, that it's like not gaslit, which is not intentional, but it's cultural. Well, not just cultural, it's all society, right? And I was like, man, imagine if we place the wisdom she's feeling, that she actually knows better than me. But when you're deconstructing a patriarchal structure or a power structure, because it's not always patriarchal, what happens is the person who, in my position, I'm being revered. I know I'm choosing this. I'm the one who can love more. Again, see this pattern showing up. And for her, there has to be an identity that she's not showing up. There's something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So in order for the structure to equalize, we have to see the information she's bringing as equally or more valid in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually deconstructs and heals generations of stuff. And so that's why it was such a big experience for both of us.
Yeah. The hottest words anybody could say is, do you want to talk about it?
Right. Would you love to chat about that? I have set aside a couple hours, and there's nothing more I'd rather hear than your voice.
Forget talking about it. Yes. Whatever the question, yes. But it really is that, would you like to talk about it, is so powerful.
It really is, because it just says, like, you matter. I'm here to listen, which that's definitely not always been my baseline demeanor. I have a podcast, so it's like I like to talk, clearly.
Sometimes I have to tell you when we're hanging out as homies, like, could you turn it off for a second? Can I just tell you a story without it turning into, well, have you thought? And I'm like, no.
I remember
eat something.
I remember that. Where these conversations led eventually was that it just wasn't working. We had to realize that there was truth in the experience she was having. I might not have liked it, but I liked it. And so we chose to end the relationship because it was the only thing we hadn't done. And honor a path that was being called forward to us that we couldn't see. And I couldn't see, but two things occurred, for each of us, which was the ending of patterns that were deeply embedded. For me, I was like, no more. I have no interest in convincing, chasing, because man, it was there, but it was so subtle. I hadn't healed it yet. I hadn't fully been in the power of a no, a power of a choice. Like, this is what I'm choosing. And if it's not aligned, cool.
There's charts that say this is one way to do it. This is the right way to do it. This is what not to eat. This is what to eat. Are there one or two, maybe three different behaviors, either for you or Kai, that's like, this is what 20-year-old me, 25-year-old me would have done had I not done the work. And this is what I did in this moment for it to end with kindness. So someone can be like, oh yeah, I can't do that anymore, but here's what I could do instead.
Well, my old pattern would have been to let a person decide how the relationship was going to be, control the depth of connection, commitment. It was normal for me to orient to the other person's needs and capacity, as opposed to step fully into my capacity and stretch them and be willing to not be met. Codependency or anxious attachment, they're all just words that organize behaviors differently. It tends to abandon self for other, and avoidantly attached tend to abandon relationship for self. Is
that what Kai would have done?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so from a nervous system, it's still self-abandonment because she's not allowing herself to connect, but it's like, from a nervous system perspective, an anxious person or someone who orients around other people, people-pleasing, codependent, right? Again, all these similar words. They have a hard time self-regulating. They don't know how to be with feelings. So I'll soothe the feeling with sugar or whatever. For people who are avoidantly attached, they have a hard time co-regulating, being with another nervous system, sharing. When someone else has needs, wants, feelings, they're like, like, hell no.
I've heard before, I don't want to be responsible for other people's feelings. And I'm like, do you want to function on Earth
right,
with
right.
anyone?
Well, to not be swallowed up by other people's feelings is,
and I understood the wound
yet.
that was coming from that, for sure.
Well, common sentence, right? I'm not responsible for your feelings. And it's like, you're not.
How convenient.
But the impact you have on my feelings is actually your responsibility. Me managing my feelings, mine. Participating in a relationship with you, my choice. That's a level of adulting and responsibility that allows two humans to thrive, because there's sovereignty and connectedness. That's really the ultimate goal, is, can I be connected to you and myself and not sell myself out, because that's actually selling you out, selling love out. So yeah, we got to this place where I was like, no more. That's why I said, I had no interest in it. I had no interest in entering a pattern again like that. I was so done. And she was so done with having to identify as something's wrong with her. And so when we ended, it was it was beautiful. I remember messaging with her and being like, because when we officially ended it, I was doing consulting in DC. And just timing wise, there was no other way other than FaceTime at the time. She had to go away on a trip for a wedding. And when she came back, I was like, look, we haven't had a conversation in person. And we were like, are you interested I had heard about closing ceremonies. I was like, Googling it. I'm like, are there other crazy people?
Yes.
Yeah.
They just call them
exit interviews.
Exit interviews.
I mean, you're a trailblazer. I should have Googled that. They're like, it's corporate. It's like
Kamal Ravikant. I told him that in like 2010 or 11. And he's like, Mary, this isn't a 5 bullet point blog post. You can't say that to men. I'm like, but why not? I want to know what was good about the relationship, what I could have done differently. I want to give them feedback. And I've attempted with the different dynamics I've had to do that, where when I'm being let go, I go through a gratitude list immediately. I'm like, well, thank you for this and thank you for that. And they're like, you're a
what
weirdo.
Are you doing?
I'm like, well, this is probably why we weren't going to work, because you think I'm weird. So when I heard that you guys did that, it gave me such joy, because if I chose you in any capacity to date you, explore you, that means I liked you, and I want to be kind to you on the way out. And that's a foreign concept of like, no, we must make them the enemy. Foreign. So when I would try to be like, I ended something when I was like up in Napa with someone, and you still have to spend several hours with each other. And I'm like, can we just be kind to each other? And again, we don't need to get in my thing. It was met with harshness. So it was
people don't know how to deal with endings.
It was very lovely to hear that you went into this with like also closing ceremony is a softer way to say it.
That's, when I Googled it, I was like, is this what we call it? And then I took like an amalgamation of different ones that I read that I was like, I want to do this, I want to do that. So I sent her a text with like, here's the...
Not a PowerPoint presentation.
yeah. It's like, on your way out, if you would, we're going to do a 360. So we lit a fire. Mm-hmm. This is actually, now people have context to this, but we had bought, when we were still navigating this like burning house conversation, it was happening at the end, because she was like talking about the dream and just sort of the visceral nature of the dream, and we were dissecting it. And we bought this wood house, a bird house, when we were in Tofino together, which was right before we ended. And it was representing, we burned it in the ceremony. Yeah, it was like such powerful. Man, and I get emotional even thinking about the process, because I remember being outside in the car. She was still in our house, and we had agreed that I was going to move back in and she was going to move somewhere else. And she was still in the house. So I was pulling up outside.
No yogurt this time.
No, it would have gotten real hot, because this was a long commitment. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I don't want to do this. And then I asked myself, do I not want to do it because I just genuinely don't want to, which I would have honored? Or do I not want to do it because the person who has to do this doesn't exist yet? Like, it's asking of me something that I don't even know how to do. And the answer immediately was like the latter. And I was like, fuck, shut the car off, go in. And so we lit the fire. We played, now those songs are like deadly, but we played some of our favorite songs that like represented, we each contributed songs that represented our relationship. Like, talk about...
You guys went for it.
And then the questions were, what were we most grateful about the other person? Which, man, like, talk about snotty cries, like, because you're like, the love is so visceral, but you're ending. So like goes against everything you're taught. And then the next question was, what were some of our favorite memories? Oh man, that again was like, it was so hard, but so beautiful. And then the last one was, what did we hope for the other person? That was harder to access, of course. Like, I can't wait for you to find partnership. So we were genuine about that. Like, that this is hard for me to access, but I do genuinely hope that, I know that life's going to bring you where you need to be. And
I hope he has chronic diarrhea.
yeah. I hope that you leave this scared to fart. It was so beautiful. And I think in a lot of ways, not only were we shifting in our experience what we'd witnessed in terms of relational endings and how they're managed culturally in divorces, things like that. Where like love was deepened in the closing, that the container of the relationship shifted. We were no longer a couple, but the love was still just so much love for each other. And then navigating the ending of that, we had boundaries of no communication, which I think is essential.
I think that's a crucial boundary.
It's 100% essential, because what most people do, especially people pleasers in endings, is they don't prioritize their healing. So they'll keep watching stories and Instagram and bullshit, which just keeps traumatizing them.
Was it you that said don't waste a good breakup, or am I making that up?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, don't waste a good breakup. You can use a breakup as a vehicle for total transformation, just like you can use dating for that. You can use anything relational. You can use anything physical, health, food. Like I just think about the word nourish. And we were talking about work-life balance, relationships, all that stuff. Everything in your life, is it nourishing you or not? Are your choices nourishing you or not? And we have to take that level of responsibility, because like to have pockets of nourishment is not to be nourished. To have a healthy relationship to your body, but not people.
What did I say on your podcast was I accepted less than I deserved because it was more than I had had. And I had to come to terms as to that's not how I should operate.
Yeah, it's such a powerful frame of reference, because, if you're modeled tolerating toxicity or inconsistency or anything like that, your nervous system will often code that as chemistry.
Yeah.
Because it's familiar, but it's really, if you think about butterflies in the stomach, it's actually almost identical to anxiety.
Yeah, I'm not a butterflies person. I feel calm around you.
But yeah, exactly. Like, how hot is reliability?
Yeah.
Like if we could all just be like,
shock me with consistency.
Man, that guy is, yeah, exactly.
Blow my mind with follow through.
Right. Man, I want to go down on follow through. Like that shit is real. Let's be honest though, when someone lays a boundary down,
100%.
When we have boundaries, we'll respect boundaries.
Right.
If we don't know how to cultivate them yet, we'll resent them and be reactive.
Right.
But like when you meet someone who's like, that doesn't work for me,
right.
You're like, oh damn.
So you guys separated, you guys, no communication, which makes me remember a quote I've given to a lot of people in my life. And it's a proverb I read when I was 16. No one can take the one you're meant to be with. And I loved that proverb, and I translated it to almost anything in life, not just romantic, meaning that I'm not going to have anxiety over chasing the thing or the person I think I need. I'm going to go about my life, improving me, working on my craft. And whether I've already met them, haven't met them, they're on the other side of the planet, married to someone right now, it doesn't matter. No one will take the one I'm meant to be with. And if I betray myself, should they come across my path, I won't be ready. I may not even see them because
you won't
not been honoring myself.
You have a lesson to learn. Like, you have someone, an angel has to come into your life, or a prick, whatever you want to call them. They got to come into your life, and they got to teach you that you self-abandon.
Yeah.
Like what a lesson to prepare you.
Because the universe is constantly calling your bluff. It's like, hey, the thing you want's over here. Can you see it? Exactly. Can you see it? Can you see it?
Like you can call it whatever you want, because some people are like, universe, God, the science, TM. It's like, it doesn't matter. You can either see that the patterns you participate in, whether God delivers them or photons do, it doesn't matter. It's like, are you accepting the lessons that you're being invited? Abraham Hicks has this great quote where she says, when you wish for something, like an amazing relationship, the universe will orchestrate everything that you need to learn to get it. So be careful what you wish for. And then we're like, I don't know why I attracted another unavailable person that I ended up banging for 6 months. That's exactly why, because you needed to learn.
That's what I think you guys did. You honored the no one can take the one I'm meant to be with, not necessarily thinking you're going to get back with each other. Because you guys, I mean, I don't know Kai personally spend time with her the way I did with you, but like you really were like, summarizing, it's over. I love her. It's over. Moving forward. I'm doing the work.
That was it. It was like, I have a breakup course. So I was living the breakup course. I was like, I live it. I was like, no contact.
So you sitting in front of your own module.
Yeah. I'm like, damn, this is a good talk. It's like pump up. I'm glad I recorded it in that coding because I need it today. I mean, it was, we were very explicit. I knew exactly what I needed to heal and move forward. And I was like, no, shit, I'm not fucking around. And I feel like if everybody took the same urgency that being, I'll say like 37 and up provides, because like if we all had the same level of just like, this is what I want, and like time's getting on, because like no matter what you think about time, and time's real or time's not, there is an expression of this life going on in the 3D right now, and time's happening.
Right.
So I'm like, I'm not fucking around. I fucked around for a long time. I spent a lot of time with people who didn't choose me, entertaining this. I was like, I'm ready for the next level.
Right.
And the next level version of that had to have that level of discipline and standard. And the question, should I get back together with my ex, which I got all the time after we got back together.
I want you to very, very clearly discern the essence of what made you both realize this was worth another shot, so somebody can separate that from the pining or the I wish I could rewrite it type of thing, because there's a difference there.
Oh, there's a huge difference.
And I don't want someone being like, well, they got back together, so I'm just
that was so much what happened.
Gonna just keep this seat open for the person that I think should sit there.
Well, it happens so much because people are like, I want to get back together. And I was like, I get it. I hear you. But you have to fully end. Like you actually have to honor the truth of the ending, which like the first part of my breakup course is like, what's the truth? Like you can't fuck around and pretend you don't know it. So in this, the end was the end. We created the ending. We had the closing ceremony, which actually I think we talk about this together is like, that actually set the stage for the coming back together, because there was so much love. There was so much grace. And if that's how it ends, oh my God, like we have such a deep level of reverence and trust for one another. And the wrong question is, do we get back together? Because the words give the idea that you have to go back. Nah. When you are working on, as you said, like when you're in the zone and you're about you and you're like following your passions and your purpose, you don't have to coerce the universe. You don't have to do anything. They're going to meet you moving forward. And this is how the world works. You know, like when a butterfly is flying to go do whatever butterflies do other than become tattoos, because that happens a lot. When they're flying to do stuff, they're not thinking like, I wonder if I take a left here, will I find the flower I'm looking for to pollinate? I think that's what they do. It's like, they don't think about that. We are the only species that is like, well, I don't know if I should do this or this. And our bodies are like, don't. Or do, or whatever. So to come back into the zone, alignment, eat, playing, crushing, to come back into that. And that's the gut reset is really, not to pitch it, but it's pretty dope. For me, what it does is it brings me back to like clarity and alignment.
Yeah.
You know, you're now in this space of between.
Yeah.
Which this, like when we were in that zone, individually, we were doing like crazy work on ourselves, growth. We were orienting to our ending very differently. Like she went deep into the witch's coven. And was more internal and didn't share much. I was like, babe, are you okay? Well, I didn't say babe because I couldn't do that anymore. But are you okay if I share our closing? Right. I was like, are you okay with me sharing some of this process? And she was like, 100%. And so like I did a podcast episode called Adulting is Hard that is about the closing ceremony. I ran a breakup course actually as I was going through it, because I was like, let's all do this together. And so she responded to a story on my Instagram and was like, hey, are you, and at this point we were able to communicate. We actually came back together in December on New Year's, and we connected, and it didn't feel right. We both had that conversation like, this isn't feeling aligned. So we actually went back to no contact. We were initially talking for like a week, but then I was at this retreat by this lady named Gangaji, who looks like she's from the Midwest, so that doesn't make sense, but you know what I'm saying. And she asked two questions. What is the thing you most want in your life? And then the follow-up question was, what are you not willing to give up to get it? And I went back to the hotel room and I called Kaya and I was like, you're still dictating the level of intimacy of these conversations. And like your readiness, you're not. I'm not ready for what is not this, because this is not this. It's not it. And she was like, oh, respect. Like, I am doing that. You're right. I didn't know I'm doing that, but I am. And so we had, again, she's so good at taking response. That's pretty helpful. She takes responsibility. And that for me was important, because as a former people pleaser, I was so used to feeling gaslit, even though that might not have been the true experience. But I was so used to like, everything's my fault. It's mine. I did this. But to have another human be like, that's me, it was strangely confronting. And it felt like I had more space, like I wasn't crazy. So we departed again. She messages me on Instagram months later when our no contact has expired. And we come back together and we go for coffee. I think she came over for coffee. And at the time she was doing a no man diet. That's what it was called, by a woman named Kendra Kunoff, which was super powerful. And I always recommend that for people who don't know how to relate to intimacy and connection. It helps, if you've never been alone, to spend time alone allows you to to find the richness in aloneness. And if you're incapable of being alone, you're not really capable of fully being in a relationship, because you'll be avoiding your aloneness to be in the relationship. We created a container. Initially, we broke her no man diet container. We were intimate, and that plummeted her into the shame drain. And so she cleared with me, and that she had broken her container for me, and she didn't like that. And I was like, you're right. I totally respect that. And so when we came back together dating, we had a no sex for 3 months. We could do everything else, which is so fun. But we like had no sex for 3 months, which was powerful because it forced us to still be in discernment. And I found my default was to go back to, she's the person, like I choose this fully. And I would have to come back to, through conversation with her, because she was more like, I don't choose, she's more avoidant, that I actually was, no, is this a fit for me? I was stepping into discernment and like, oh, and that really, when you make a choice from a true, authentic place like that, as opposed to, I just want commitment quick for safety, then the choice is authentic, as opposed to avoid my own pain or fear of rejection. So when it came from that embodied place where we dated for 3 months, we had no sex, it was like, are we wanting this? Is this aligned? And I remember saying to her, like, I don't trust you. Like, you tell me you choose me, but you told me that for 5 years. I don't believe you. And she was like, you're right. I get why you don't believe me.
Is this how you guys fight?
Not always.
Okay, because there are actual fights that happen.
Yeah, they get
I'm not saying angry and name calling, but like the examples you've been giving is like, oh, I say this, and she goes, yup. And I'm like, it's so simple.
A lot of the time, yeah. I mean, there's intensity, but then we come back to repair.
Meaning the intensity is good and healthy.
Yeah. Like,
and then being able to come back
there's
from
intensity to our energy, our voices, but not yelling. But like intensity, which is important in relationships to have a safe container for the expression of anger, but clean anger. And a lot of people who are hypersensitive to anger will say, you're being loud, you're yelling right now, but they're actually just overtly sensitized. It doesn't mean that it's not sometimes happening. But I remember when we were early on, if I was like getting intense, she'd be like, you're yelling. I'm like, I am definitely not yelling. There is like,
I'll show you yelling.
There's like 10 times at least what I'm doing right now.
Right.
And I remember when we worked with a therapist, he was like, there needs to be space for Mark's anger because it's not destructive. It's just like, it's intense, but your nervous system doesn't have, so how do we teach your nervous system that it's safe? Again, that's a whole other pocket behind the paywall. But yes.
Which we can do. There's like all these shit off questions that we even record as audio only later.
Yeah.
You felt I don't trust you because you said.
Yeah. So sorry. Yeah. She said to me, you're right. I'm not going anywhere. And I was like, oh God, it was like such something I'd been waiting to hear, but it was true. And, I think of like relationship 1.0 was 2 kids, teenagers still playing out their wounds. And I had avoided women till that moment. When we left our relationship, I was ready to meet a woman. I was ready to be loved at a level because I was ready to love at that level. And that relationship ending needed to happen in order for me to step fully into my power. And of course, that's an ongoing journey. But I was ready to be met by a woman, and anything less than a woman. And I don't mean that hierarchically or judgmentally, but like anything less than an embodied, powerful woman, which I was so terrified of, I didn't want. And she came back as that woman, and she was like, I choose this. And when she said it, it was like, I felt it. And so it took a bit to,
Because your nervous system
Right.
knows your body. Our bodies
Oh.
are so much more smart.
my soul was
smarter than
like, oh, you're in for it now, bro.
Mhm.
And it's true.
Bet is how we say it. Bet.
What's that?
It's almost like a challenging. Like I'll be like, hey, I bet I can do that. You're like, bet I can do it too. So
Shit,
she said,
I'm
I
getting
choose
new
you.
lingo,
And your
like,
nervous system was like, bet.
bet.
But your brain was like, bruh.
Seriously. And it's like, now I'm walking a path I don't have a manual to. I don't have.
How exciting.
It's so beautiful because it's like when we were seeking mentorship, we had not met someone who could walk us through what we were navigating, which was the deeper healing of codependent patterns, which I would call codependent hooks. We have a book coming out called Liberated Love.
Your second baby.
Yeah, I say written before we had a baby.
Okay.
Which I got to tell you is prep for having a baby.
So this whole experience from Sensator, is that what you're called?
Right,
Sensator.
Yeah.
To 40-year-old virgin,
I was never a 40-year-old virgin, but yes.
To pharma, to relationships, to breaking up and then coming back together. I heard that you have a dream idea for a dating show. Would you share that?
Oh, wow. Yeah, we're in the midst
Is that what's next? Like, book
TV
and a dating
next.
show.
Yeah, I mean, dating show is probably not because I always get told, like, you should create a dating app. I'm like, I have no interest in getting into the dating app world. Like, most of you don't even know how to swipe. I want to bring relational education to TV.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of subjects that are really stirring me currently, but one is just like the most, I want to do like where it's kind of like the Anthony Bourdain of relationships, like, ultimately I have a kid right now, so I can't do it, but like getting to a place where there is a lot more travel involved in it. I also have a deep desire to explore much more the psychological influence of culture on an individual and individual on a culture. Mm. I think the last 3 years, but I think people could probably say this is true of all time, for me, just because of my age and where I'm at, I've been really fascinated by the use of psychological techniques to influence collective behavior, and also the impact and use of belonging and shame to change behavior. That to me, I think, has been detrimental to mental health. And also we're seeing that there's an inability to talk about the nuances of subjects. Name all the most sensitive subjects. I don't even need to name them. Everyone knows them. Mm-hmm. But there's 99% of humans live in the complex space between alternative ideologies or alternative perspectives. Those perspectives tend to be the exact same, horseshoe politics. They're both rigid, but when we only have two choices, when we only have you're either for this or against it, that doesn't cover the complexity of human thought, behavior, experience. And we're eradicating nuance. So to me, I really am very fascinated about the psychological process that occurs, that creates that. So that's, if anyone wants to make a documentary with me, I'm in. And the television would be the exploration of relating and the most complex, most desired areas of exploration, where I look at like the science, but work with people on the show that are dealing with that at the same time.
Any parting wisdom when it comes to honoring and letting go of old dating patterns, relationship patterns? Like a step one for somebody so they can step into the eat, play, crushing of life?
First, there is no creating something without something dying. So like you can't build new patterns without the experience of the death of your old patterns, which means safety, perceived safety, security. And, Kai once said to me when I was exploring this sort of identity death, she said, let it be a good death. Mm. And I thought, oh man, we don't do that. We don't know how to relate to mortality in a way that, again, like relational endings, we don't know how to relate to it in a way that is graceful. Mm-hmm. And so I would say be graceful, be compassionate for the patterns that you might see as dysfunctional or unhealthy or destructive, that as you let them go, they served you. Even though they might not perceptually have served you, they have served you. They come from a desire to survive. So when we can honor them on their exit, we can learn from them. If you reject something, you can't learn from it. The wisdom innate in every dysfunctional behavior, there's always wisdom. And if you can't see it as that, you will reject it and it will live in the shadow of your behaviors. You'll keep recreating it because you're not willing to look at it. Mm-hmm. So be open to transformation, change, you have to learn to get comfortable with the unknown. You have to learn to be like, the experience of fasting really teaches you to be in spaces between. It teaches you to be with discomfort. We are a culture that's terrified of discomfort. We don't know. We code negative emotions as bad. We try to treat everything with a pharmaceutical product, not seeing that grief, pain, anger, those are all emotions that are informing you about your environment. And like the word emotion to evoke motion. So they're really inviting you to change your environment. And there's that thought of like, when a flower isn't doing well, you don't blame the flower.
Mm-hmm.
You change the soil.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true of us. So
I think you reposted one of those for me. Sometimes the plant doesn't need more water, it needs new soil.
Yeah, right. Like, and we go on vacation and then we come home and we wonder why we enter right back into the same physiological
Michael
dysfunction.
White, the poet, one of my favorite quotes of his is, a true well-felt pain can be just as generous as a true well-felt joy. So be open.
Yeah, and recognize that when you step into honoring the truth of how you feel, who you are, what you want, who you've been, who the other person has been.
Sounds like great questions for you guys to write down and answer.
Yeah, you can hit rewind.
For those who like instructions.
Well, and like, if you get real about all those things and you tell the truth about them, the reality is you're going to have to change. No transformation occurs without starting with the truth. And sometimes the truth is going to burn down some shit. I'll bring
the bridges
the
I
matches.
burn light the way. I think that's a quote from 90210.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Dylan McKay.
So where can people find you?
Links will be in the show notes. You can find me on Instagram at Create the Love, where I talk more about the cultural things I'm talking about. It's Mark Groves. Those are about to have a baby and be unified. My podcast, Mark Groves Podcast, which Mary's been on, and createthelove.com is where all my courses are. So like, if you're going through a breakup, if you want to turn dating into a transformative, powerful, healing, amazing process, there's Dating 101.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that is it on today's episode. Thanks so much for hanging out. Your time and attention never goes unappreciated. If anything in today's show stood out to you, I encourage you to share it to social and tag me. That is how you can help a little independent show like mine grow. And of course, rate, review, and subscribe to Eat, Play, Crush wherever it is you get your podcasts. If you want to follow me, I'm at Paleo Chef on social media, or the show at Eat, Play, Crush. You want to stay in touch via my newsletter or get your hands on the gut reset, visit eatplaycrush.com. And until next time, be well, do good, and trust your gut.